everyone, welcome back. So that was a little jam I've been working on, a kind of moody, wintry, down-tempo kind of thing, using a few mutable instruments modules and clones, a few other bits and pieces. The main thing that's different with this patch is I'm using this kalimba, it's just a cheap one I picked up on Amazon, with a contact mic, which I'm amplifying and running through Monsoon, the Clouds clone. And that's been used to create the kind of background chord drone wash layer, along with some percussive effects, because I'm still running it through the reverb as well, so I can tap the box and get these kind of nice phasey percussion things going on. So I've got four main elements in this patch. There's the Monsoon background wash and effects. There's some percussive kind of sequencing going on from rings. There's a sort of bass line synth part from Plaits, and there are some drums. So as I've done before, I'm just going to not unplug everything, but I'll just explain how I've kind of put each part together and how the whole sort of fits together as a jam. The most interesting bit is probably the Monsoon voice. So I'm going to start there. So the signal chain for the Monsoon voice is basically the kalimba with the contact mic is going into the Making Sound Machines Tausend dB mic preamp, which is a 4-channel, really handy device. Can bring up the level of these kind of contact mics. Any other kind of signal you can imagine really can bring it up to Eurorack level. You can also use it to kind of distort Eurorack signals too. That's running then into Monsoon, and I'll sort of show the process of sampling that background wash and how I create that with the granular effects. I'm then running it back into Tausend dB to add a bit more gain, because the way I've sampled it means I'm taking quite a quiet part of the signal to loop. So I'm giving it a bit more gain there. It's then coming back over here and running into the Expert Sleeper's Beatrix phaser for a phasing effect. It's then running through there into the Danny Sound dynamics, and I'm using the kick drum from the drums to sidechain it just to give it a little bit of sidechain compression. I'm also adding a little bit of the exciter, rolling off a little bit of the low end. Not really doing much else with it tone-wise because it's got quite a lot of character already. So that's basically that. Let's try recording a new sound into it, and I'll build it up with that. Okay, so I've basically reset Monsoon. I've taken the output chain away, and I'm just taking the output straight into the sound card. I've got the input being fed just by the piezo through the preamp. I've got all the sliders centered. I've got the wet dry at 50%. I've taken the reverb off. I've taken the pitch back to 0. The input gain's jacked up. I've unfrozen it, and if I push the density up, now when I strike this kalimba box, you'll get this kind of echo. And the trick is really just to freeze it and then home in on a bit of the decaying sound. And I'm not plucking the tines on the kalimba. As nice as that sounds, I've been using that in another patch, but for this patch I was literally just banging the box, letting it resonate a bit. All the tines resonate near the contact mic, and you get this nice kind of cluster chord sound, but it sounds really nice and atmospheric. So let's just try banging it and then hitting freeze. I'm just going to pop it down and leave it fully wet. And now if I adjust the position, the further back I go, I get near that strike where it's getting quite aggressive. So I just want to ease it just past that point. And if I now increase the size of the grains and smooth them out with the texture, we get this lovely kind of ringing chord effect. Chuck some reverb on top of that just to make it even more smeary. And to control it, I was basically just using a 2-note sequence. So I was using stages as a sequencer, just clocked from Pamela's new workout. And I was taking a volt per octave input signal here. And the way these voltages work, you basically have to turn the pitch right down here to get to where I was. And I was just jumping between these two pitches a tone apart. So it's quite quiet, as you can hear, because there's nothing really else going on. So if I now switch back to the output chain that I had, so this is running back through the preamp for some more gain, into the phaser, which is being modulated by an LFO from Oct, into the Danny Sound dynamics for some compression, side chaining. So there's a bit more volume and character there. And the other bit of modulation I had was another LFO modulating that position. And it's just case of backing this back slightly so that it's not gonna go into that abrasive zone. Yeah, it's getting a bit distorted there, so let's just nudge that down a fraction. And that's kind of it. You've got this lovely kind of background wash. And if I bring the wet dry back down to nearer 50%, that means I can still whack the box and get these lovely phased reverb tails. It's even nice to pluck the tines, but I'm not going to pretend to be a kalimba player. It's more fun just to whack it. So that's that voice. The next one that I faded in the jam was the rings patch, and this is pretty simple. This is it's the music thing Turing Machine, and I'm using the pulse output for a sort of rhythm, which is different from just a straight 16th. That's going into the pluck, and I'm using the R&D step from DivKit and SSF to give us some random modulation on every note, which I'm hitting the brightness and the damping with. So that part sounds like this. It's just the modal resonator with quite a short damping. And I've kind of set it to be quite atonal. It's more of a percussive effect this than a melody. There's also an LFO from Oct, which is modulating the position as well, just for some subtle movement there too. So that works quite nicely with the wash. I'm actually running it through the zoom pedal as well, the rings part, which has got a delay and a reverb on it just for some more atmosphere. And then the only other synth part in this jam so far was from Plaits, and this is from the new firmware update. It's the new first orange mode, which is the kind of analog style oscillator. So I'm sequencing this from the BeatStep Pro. And I'm using the third channel of R&D step to get a little bit of per note modulation for the filter cutoff frequency, which I can also tweak manually like this. And I've got the resonance dialed up on the sort of more extreme side, just to give us these little croaky notes. And that per step modulation randomizes that filter cutoff, which gives us quite a nice effect. So these parts all play together quite nicely. It's definitely a kind of mutable instrument sound, but it's pretty nice. And then drum-wise, I'll just talk you through what I was doing there. It's basically a pretty simple pattern from the BeatStep Pro. I've got a kick and a snare sample from the Disting, and I've got some hats from the 2HP hat, and I've got an 808 clave from a Tiptop module. I'm mixing them, and I'm actually running them through my Tascam M-208 mixer, which I've overdriven quite heavily to give it this real lo-fi kind of crunch. No software processing on this really, it's all analog warmth, and I've just got a couple of variations on that pattern. So let's just bring it all back together. Drums and rings. Fade up the Monsoon wash. And the synth part from Plaits. That's it. Nice hypnotic, moody little number. I think bringing in these external elements which are not completely synthesized and running them through the effects like this adds a really nice organic layer to things. Really happy with how this is sounding, so I'm going to take this into Ableton and do a bit more work on it. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed the sound. Hope you've got a couple of tips for how to maybe use these modules. Not really reinventing the wheel with rings or Plaits here, but they're sounding pretty nice. Really impressed with the Plaits firmware update. Can't wait to explore the DX7 sounds a bit more as well. And that's it for 2022 from me, if I get this up in time. Thanks very much for all your support this year. Really gratifying to see how many of you have been enjoying the videos and all your lovely comments. Be back soon, lots of plans for next year. In the meantime, as ever, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.